What's up, everybody? I am back with a new YouTube video after nearly 8 weeks from being off, and as you'll notice behind me, the backdrop has changed a little bit. The studio has had a small overhaul, and that is what we are going to talk about today on the channel. What transpired to bring about this change, specifically speaking, the console that I have purchased for the studio that's sitting here behind me, and what was it that made me choose this specific console out of all the things that I could have purchased for my studio during this time of change. So today, we're going to talk about a lot of change, and we're going to talk specifically about the changes that took place that led to the purchase of this console that is sitting here behind me. And we're going to get to talking about the console and what it is and why I chose it in just a second. But I think to give some context to the situation, I think it's important to tell some of the history of how I got to where I am today. So this building that the studio is in, I started renting in July of 2013, and I moved into it with sort of just a dream of being able to have a place where maybe some local kids could come and learn music. I could teach guitar lessons and, you know, record some friends' bands, and it was sort of just a hobby at that point. And so we had a little bit of gear, and things kind of plodded along for those first couple of years, you know, a project here and there, just enough to kind of pay the bills, sometimes not pay the bills, and, you know, you're dipping into your pocket or whatever. But I had a really good full-time job at the time. My wife has a full-time job, so, you know, we kind of made ends meet. Occasionally I would, you know, flip some gear, whatever I needed to do to keep the studio going. And for the next 3 or 4 years, that's what I did until finally I met Warren Hewitt and started editing videos for him. And I worked for Produce Like a Pro and editing course videos for Pro Mix Academy, editing some of Warren's YouTube videos, even went to California a few times, to LA, hung out with Warren, did the NAMM show out there, did some stuff at Sunset Sound. Somewhere after about the 2.5-year mark of working for Produce Like a Pro, that is when I met Matt Goldman. And things were winding down with me editing videos. I didn't have as much time to do that sort of thing for Warren. I was starting to get more and more bands coming here to this studio, which at the time had just, you know, all of my instruments, my collection of instruments, and a Universal Audio Apollo, a first gen one, and a Hackintosh that I had built, and a small collection of microphones. And I went to Atlanta actually to buy my first console, a DDA DMR-12, and that was at Matt Goldman's studio in Atlanta. And so I went to pick it up, brought it back, was starting to work on it, and probably 2 or 3 weeks after I brought that console back, Matt called me and asked if he could come up and look at the building. And so when he came and he looked around at the building and he saw all the space that we had here, he proposed to me that we should partner up because he had a lot of gear and his lease was ending at the studio that he had been in for 10 years, and I had this space and not a lot of gear, and so it was just like, hey, we could share this spot and we could work around each other, work with each other some, and kind of partner up and have a better situation for both of us. And so that is what we decided to do. And so for the past 4 years, since basically May of 2018, we have shared this space and shared the gear, and it has been amazing. I've learned so much about tracking bands from Matt Goldman. I've learned so many things also just on my own, just with the setup that we had about tracking bands live, and, you know, a lot of records that I'm really proud of I got to make during that 4-year period. 8 weeks ago, Matt came to the studio and he told me that he had an opportunity to move his operation to Nashville. And that was really the catalyst for all of the changes that I have made in the past few weeks, including the console that is sitting behind me right now. With Matt leaving and having an opportunity to set up a new studio in Nashville, there was actually sort of a big hole in my arsenal of gear and my ability to be able to make records going forward without making some decisions on how exactly I wanted to do that. I only had my collection of guitars, some of these amplifiers that you see behind me, a few microphones, and a couple of pieces of outboard gear, including my Symmetrix 501 compressors and the Audioscape Optocomp that you see behind me. I decided probably within 12 hours of him breaking the news to me that it was going to be a really good thing for me to just go ahead and make it a clean separation for both of us and to try to get everything that I felt like that I needed to be able to continue to make records in just one fell swoop. And so initially I started looking at things like building some preamps from Cappy and maybe getting some 500 series racks, and also getting one of the really nice desks that companies like Danger Fox or Argosy makes. And I was really thinking about having all of the outboard gear and the mic pre's and any EQs just right in front of me in sort of a, the newer style of doing things, instead of having a console, which is what I was used to working on. And this is where the big decision happened to continue to work off of a console and look for a console, is that, first of all, I needed to do something that was going to be quick. I couldn't make this a long transition because I have projects that I'm in the middle of that I need to finish. Second, I started adding up the cost of even building something like Cappy's, and it was, to get as many channels as I wanted, which was at least 24, if not 32, and you're talking about $250 to $300 a channel, plus you have to build them. And then I started asking people, how long does it take to build these? And people that are better at soldering and putting those things together than me can only build 1 or 2 a day. And so then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's like 3 weeks of just straight building to be able to put together enough preamps to be able to pull this off right away. Within about 2 days, I realized I can't do this without a console. It's just not enough inputs. It's not enough equalizers. I really, really like to track things where I'm committing to at least some of the sounds on the way in, especially with drums and things like that. I really try to carve on the EQ and get the kick to sound like a kick drum from the minute that we're recording it. I'm capturing things with a little bit of intent and purpose behind them. And so I went to Reverb, and I actually started thinking I had seen a Sony console on Reverb about 6 months ago. I wonder if it's still out there, and I think I saved it in my watch list. So I went to my watch list, and sure enough, it was still there, and the seller had dropped the price actually $2,000 from what he had it listed for back in August of 2021 when I had first seen it. And so I was very excited about this for a couple of reasons. One, I really wanted this console for probably 6 or 7 years. One of the first projects that I got to do in a big studio that wasn't this studio, the studio that I own, was in Chicago at a place called Downbeat Studio, and they had a Sony MXP-3036. These are consoles that Sony made right after they bought MCI. So they bought MCI like 1982, 84, something like that. And then 1985, 86, they're designing, they're building these consoles, they're releasing them into the world. And so the one that I got was actually purchased in 1986, December of 1986, and the owner told me it was delivered to him in February of 87. And so this is my new to me, Sony MXP-3036. And I really love these consoles. I think that they are really cool because they're very modular. Most of your big consoles are, but I can remember the one that we worked on in Chicago. It had preamps in it from a company called Normaphone, which is Greg Norman that works at Electrical Audio. John Hardy had some pre's in there. You can drop API 212 preamps right into this console. They fit in the preamp slots. Plus, there are at least five, maybe 6 different EQ modules that Sony made for these consoles that you could sort of pick and choose what you wanted and put them into different slots and positions. And so this console actually came with all 5 of the EQ types that Sony made for it installed in various positions. And so that is really, really cool to me. The console all works. It came with this neat little computer that's really cute. And I had it mounted for a while, and I ended up taking it back down because it wasn't worth having up there. It just took up too much space. And the computer actually controls the VCA automation that is built into the desk. And, I've had a lot of people ask me, are you going to mix on the console? And are you going to use it? You're going to use the VCA automation, stuff like that? No, I'm absolutely not going to do that. I'm definitely married to Pro Tools, and I'm going to continue to mix inside of that because I'm really fast on it, and I don't have any desire to sit down and learn how to mix on this console. But it did come with this really cool little remote that slides back and forth on the desk. Again, this is really just a front end for me. I made another video about the Yamaha console called I Can't Mix on This Console. You can watch that video audio here or whatever if you want to. And I don't mix on the console. I mean, it would be kind of cool, I think, maybe to throw up something that's maybe a simpler mix on the desk and play around with it, but I'm very happy with the way that Pro Tools sounds and works for me, and so I don't plan on using the console for that. But I do want to have something that has a really great front end to it where I can track something the way that I want it to sound, get it pretty much the way that I want it to sound as it's going into Pro Tools. And I want something that's got a lot of flexibility as far as the amount of channels that can come in. I really have always wanted this studio to be set up so that, the drums were just always mic'd up and ready to go, and those faders are just labeled on the console, and when you want to record drums, you just go up and you push up faders. That is what I've been working on for the last couple of weeks too, since getting the console commissioned, is wiring up my room, placing things around the live room the way that I want them to be, so that, when it's time to pull up a guitar, you don't have to go and monkey with the patch bay a ton. You can just go for it. The other reason that I wanted to choose a console is because one of the things that I always loved even about the Yamaha console is that if you want to blend 3 or 4 microphones together and just commit to maybe the way an electric guitar sounds with a 57 and a ribbon mic and maybe a 421 or something, you can just blend them all together and use the busing on the console, and then you only have one channel in Pro Tools that you've committed to that's just, whatever electric guitar sound it is that you're pulling up, but you've managed to blend with the faders those 3 microphones together. And I love working that way. And so once I really started thinking about it and started looking at some of the other options that were out there for me with different pieces of gear that I could pick, I just was like, yeah, this just makes sense. Let's just go for the console. And so the Sony has 24 buses on it, plus I've got 36 inputs total. 24 of those have mic pre's, and then the other 12 are line level inputs, and so it works out really good. I've got a few of my DIs just routed to the line level inputs, and then I've got all of my drum microphones coming into the first 16 channels, and I've got microphones on cabs, and I've got my MW1 in here, and everything is just kind of routed the way that I want to. And about the only thing that I'm patching these days are if I'm changing any of the outboard compressors, or I did get 2 of the Warm Audio WA273 mic pre's. So it's been really, really cool, and I really just, I love this console. I love working on a console. I think that it's going to be really cool going forward to get to use this console, track some bands live, also make some records, without tracking the band necessarily live, just, piecemealing them together, which is fun to do on a rock song or something. And so far, it has been a lot of fun to work on this desk, and we're going to talk more about it in the future. Maybe we'll have some other videos answering some questions about the console, but that's it. That's how I got here, and that's why I chose this console, and why I'm looking forward to working on it in the future. All right, I'll see you in the next video.